Lionel, is that you?
There, I think I got it. And I've hit the button. Rich, the Wisneski is here with me. It's part 2 of the Cresson Chronicles. And no, I can't think of anybody better to help me with the introduction and the wrap-up than the Wiz.
Happy to be here, Lionel.
Yeah. Now, along those lines, because you know everything and you can find answers to everything, do you know why a cat has a rough tongue?
You got me on that one. I have no idea.
But you will get the answer. That's the thing about the Wiz. Eventually, the answer will show up somewhere. It may not be anywhere near the correct answer because it's not accuracy is really is not a concern for us. It's the transparency that we're after.
Sure, of course. Hey, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Since thinking about part 1, do we know what show this is going to be on?
Yeah, we do. As a matter of fact, I actually had already thought of that, and I thought, boy, I wonder if after like 5 or 6 years, I'll have that at the tip of my tongue. But I know exactly what you're going for, because this is actually, I believe, Monday, September the 25th, if I'm not mistaken. That's right, it is. It's Monday, September the 25th. Which means it's on the free channel, which means it's sponsored by Rapido Trains.
Your fast track to model railroading fun.
Rapido Trains, your fast track to model railroading fun.
So this is part 2 of the Cresson Chronicles. I'm dying to ask you a question about something that's happened at the old New Jersey Transit that I know you and Dave are working on, but this show's going to come out before the official announcement, so I'm not going to ask you about that.
Okay.
Aren't you proud of me?
I'm relieved. I'm relieved.
What's the coolest locomotive or train you've photographed in the last couple of weeks?
The thing that, I'll just go with what's the most recent, and that was just in the last few days when our shop released one of our electric locomotives called an Alp 46 that has been decorated to look like the electric locomotives we had 40 years ago, as opposed to the more modern paint scheme that the rest of the fleet has. And it's been out for 2 days, and it has lit up the internet.
Oh, really?
It's almost universal like for it.
Really?
I was able to see it, on its first day out. So I go by, because our office is near the Northeast Corridor that many of our trains run on, and able to snap a picture of it. So that was pretty exciting.
So what part of New Jersey Transit is electrified?
So we have essentially 4 lines that have overhead electrification that we operate service using electric powered equipment. Some of the trains run with a electric locomotive pulling coaches, and other trains run with what we call multiple unit or MU cars, where every pair of cars has what it needs to move on its own. But if you link up 2 pairs, 3 pairs, 4 pairs, etc., you make a train of self-powered cars. So that's not the majority of our equipment, electric equipment, but it's not a insignificant amount.
Okay, so for people who are listening to us around the world, and there are plenty, what exactly is the Northeast Corridor?
So the Northeast Corridor is the name that has been given to the railroad line between Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, New York City, which is 225 miles north of Washington, and then continuing up to Boston, which now I'm just guessing is probably 300 miles from New York City, and passing through some other major cities along the way that people may have heard of, like Baltimore, Philadelphia, Newark, New Jersey, New Haven, Connecticut, Providence, Rhode Island. The history of the line is mixed in terms of predecessor railroad companies. The Pennsylvania Railroad built the line from New York to Washington and electrified it in the 1930s. And the majority of the line from New York up to Boston is part of the former New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad. It was only electrified between New York and New Haven. From New Haven to Boston was diesel power only. But Amtrak extended that electrification, and that now allows these electric power trains to operate from Boston all the way to Washington.
So some of it's only been electrified since, what, the late 70s, early 80s?
Actually, even later than that. I'm going to guess around 2000 plus or minus is when the electrification.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that's just a guess. I don't have the exact date. From New Haven to up to Boston.
So as a what would you call me? An uneducated novice of railroading and things like that. That sounds like it would be very unusual that the Amtrak electrified that stretch of railroad in 2000. I mean, I always associate electrification with, the 40s and 50s, like from, with the Pennsylvania Railroad. I would never have associated that it was installed at the turn of the century.
Yeah, no, there are a handful of places like that part of the Northeast Corridor. In New Jersey, we extended electrification on a couple of lines in the 1980s and then again the early 2000s. And currently in California, south of San Francisco, the Caltrain commute service, the former Southern Pacific line, is presently being electrified to operate electric commuter service. There's also electrified service, modern, built in the post-2000 era. For example, in the Denver area, they have commuter rail lines using electric MU cars.
And that's overhead wire, right?
Yes.
In layman's terms, and I know you're not an expert, and I don't expect you to know exactly, but in layman's terms, like, why electrification as opposed to diesel power? Is it a case of more efficient? Is it a case of more powerful? Is it a case of it's easier to fix?
I think there's several reasons why it has seen a lot of favor, and one of them certainly would be in terms of being able to draw more power and to accelerate more quickly and to travel more quickly than a diesel-powered train. For a diesel locomotive to generate the horsepower that's needed to operate at a very high speed, it needs to be a big engine, which means it's heavy, needs to carry a lot of fuel to make it move. And with the electrified system, the locomotives can sort of reach into that power grid and suck out a lot of power, and they generally accelerate much quicker than a diesel train. And certainly in a sort of regional commuter type network where there's a fair number of stops, that acceleration component is critical to achieving a marketable travel time.
Yeah, that actually makes sense. I mean, so basically, it sounds like what you're saying is in heavy urban areas with numerous stops along the line, it's much more efficient, much quicker, simply because electric trains can accelerate faster. And like you say, a diesel engine would have to be pretty heavy, carry a ton of fuel. There's probably generally more maintenance. It'd probably be a higher maintenance operation as well.
Well, certainly a diesel engine is really an electric, excuse me, an electric train as well, right? The diesel engine is just turning a generator, right, to create the electric power that turns those traction motors, turns the wheels.
I wonder how many people actually realize that. I think I was certainly into adulthood before I realized that basically any locomotive is really a power station, because the prime movers really are creating, the thing that they're creating is generating electricity to power the axles. So really, it's like a moving generator. It's nothing like a car where the prime mover is connected to the wheels. It's connected, but what the prime mover, what the diesel engine is creating is electricity, which is then transferred to the wheels.
Yeah, so the diesel engine turns, and the shaft drives the generator, right? Which is usually right behind the cab.
Yeah.
And the generator makes the electricity, which then gets transmitted down to the traction motors on the axles. And that's how it moves. It does not have a transmission the way your car does.
Let me ask you this question. Do you think Rapido trains?
You're fast track for model railroading fun.
If it's N, if it's HO, the fast track is Rapido.
Will ever replicate the Alp 40 in the old New Jersey Transit paint scheme?
I couldn't even begin to guess.
Me neither, but I thought it was a pretty nice segue.
I don't know enough about their product line to know whether they have anything, close to that they can make. Obviously, the Alp 46 that we call it is based on a European design that's used in other countries. So
isn't it amazing how we do this podcast? You and I the only thing we knew was we were introducing the Cresson Chronicles Part 2. Other than that, we had no idea what we were going to talk about, and we just killed 10 minutes talking about electrification in the Northeast Corridor.
There's lots to talk about.
I know. I love it. That's like my favorite part. I love it when people I'll contact somebody for the first time they've never spoken to, never met, blah, blah, blah. And you want to be on the podcast? Yeah, it sounds interesting. Can you give me an indication what the questions will be? Nope. I have no idea. You don't have a list of questions? Nope. Well, then what is it? It's a conversation. Well, what will we talk about? I have no idea. But I would imagine some of it will be about your layout and your interest in trains.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess in my case, I had heard your podcast before I was ever on it. But even if I hadn't, I think the first thing I would do to prepare myself would be to listen to an episode or two of other people on your podcast. And I think, that's all you need to do to prepare.
Yeah. Well, and then you're running, at that point, we're running the risk of losing the guest altogether.
It depends. Yeah, I guess it depends on which show that they choose to listen to.
Yeah. All right. Enough fooling around, enough tomfoolery. That was a very interesting discussion, but unfortunately, Rich, this show isn't about, well, actually, it is kind of about you. This is Cresson Chronicles Part 2, and the three gentlemen we speak with in order of the way they appear on the show, and I hope you don't you can take this as you're the leadoff hitter, or you can take this as you are merely the opening act. But the three gentlemen we are going to be talking to are none other than Rich the Wisneski, sitting on the front porch at the Cresson Inn. And then we talked to Alex Lang, who is the owner and proprietor of the Station Inn in Cresson, Pennsylvania. And if you'd like to go to their website, it's stationinpa.com. And we highly recommend that you go and try it out, because I love sitting on the front porch doing interviews. And one of my favorite things this time is I interviewed Ralph Heiss like at 12:30 at night, which I thought was really 12:30 a.m., which I thought was really cool.
That's awesome.
And finally, it seems only appropriate that we wrap up with none other than Uncle Dave Abelies, because this little weekend that happens is his idea. It started when he was 17 years old. It's been going for 30 years, and you and I have been fortunate enough to be included in recent years. I think you said this was your 6th year going, and this was my 2nd year.
Yep.
Going, and I feel very fortunate to be included, because it's about 30 people that Dave has met over the years, either through work, through people that come and operate the Onondaga Cutoff, people he's met through rail fanning, or people like Alex Lang, who he met when the owner, the original owner,
Tom Davis.
Yeah. When he would have these weekends in February called I don't know what he called them. Like they were the old timers.
Old timer. Yeah, that's it.
And they were handpicked people, and I believe Dave met Alex Lang during one of these particular weekends in February.
Yep.
I can't even imagine what it would be like to be there in February, because first I would know it's probably going to be cold. So I can't imagine myself sitting on the porch for hours on end watching trains go by.
Agreed.
I'm thinking in the February meets there was a fairly large consumption of alcoholic beverages.
Probably to help you keep warm, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, that's it. We've killed 16 minutes. We know who we're talking to. Rich, yours truly. Well, not yours truly. Yours truly. Rich Wisneski. I'm saying it better, aren't I now? Wisneski.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
Well, because I thought it was, for a long time, I was pronouncing it as if it was W-E-S. And it's not. It's W-I-S, which, of course, is Wis, and then Ness, and then Key. Wisneski.
Yeah.
First it's Rich, then Alex Lang, the proprietor, and finally Uncle Dave. Do you know what you have to do now, Rich?
Subway chimes, go.
Okay, so now I'm sitting here with the Wiz, Rich Wisneski. How'd you get that name? You're the Wiz.
That name. I thought you meant Wisneski. That was my grandfather's name, my dad's name.
No, the Wiz. We figured your real name, your full legal name, you got from your mom and dad.
Thank you. I've had a couple different nicknames growing up.
Have you?
Yeah. Ski was another common one.
Ski?
Yep.
Oh, okay, Wisneski.
Yeah. I think any Polish kid has been called that at some point in their life.
I guess so, eh? I got a guy that works for me. His last name is Zarowski.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go, you know what? When I get back to the office, I'll call him Ski.
See what happens.
Guarantee
you. He's been called that before.
Yeah. He's worked for me for 32 years. I have no idea what he does.
Are you hiring?
Yeah. We're always hiring, but I don't think we need another guy holding up the doorpost.
Yeah.
You know that guy that hangs around the office, and one day it dawns on you that really all he ever does is go from office door to office door and say, "Hey, how's it going?"
Sure.
Leans on the doorposts.
But that's one of the things that I missed from remote work. Didn't have the opportunity to interact with people like that,
Yeah.
So, I mean,
So
there's a fine line, I believe.
Are you that guy?
No. But I mean, like having people stop by and interact.
Right.
These are people you spend a lot of time with, and, it's good to feel like you know them.
You spend more time with your coworkers probably than you do with just about anybody else.
Yes, I agree. Especially if you work in the same place for a long time like you have.
Or you.
Yes.
Yeah, but my deal is a little different. I can get them to get donuts for me. Right?
Sure.
They don't have to have a reason other than I say, "Hey, go get us some donuts." But that's not my job. But on the top of your paycheck is my name.
Tell them whatever.
Go get me some donuts.
Exactly.
But I'm a high-priced technician. I understand that. And when you get back from the donuts, you can go back to being that.
Right.
So what have you seen? What have you seen so far here at Cresson 2023 that's jumped out at you? Anything?
Well, from a railroad perspective, the trains have been very clustered. By that I mean you'll see 3 or 4 trains in a relatively short period of time, and then you'll go hours without seeing anything. And that's while that overall is not uncommon on the railroad, I think it's uncommon for this area.
That's what I was
here.
Gonna say,
you usually would see a train. Seemed like every so often there'd be another train. And here we've had some big lulls this year. We've seen a couple of foreign power locomotives, not many, handful. But the most amazing thing that happened here, and this will be certainly other people who had a better view of it will tell you about, was the runaway gondola cars that rolled out of the yard just to our right, to the east of us, and rolled down track 5 west and smashed into the back of a standing empty grain train. And
when was this? Like yesterday?
No, this was Thursday evening.
Really?
Thursday evening. And I mean, I was in my car in the parking lot across the street, so I didn't actually see it because, I'm below grade over there. But pretty much everybody up here saw it happen. And it's a mystery. Those cars have been sitting up in the yard all day. And then all of a sudden they just rolled silently down the track for, I guess it's maybe a quarter of a mile.
Yeah.
And then, boom, really big impacts.
Wow.
When they hit the back of that train.
And how many cars are we talking that were?
Two.
Two. Okay.
Yeah, they're like maintenance of way gondola cars.
All right.
And
So then this is a grade.
Yes, we are on the grade, the west slope of the Allegheny Mountains here. I have to admit, I do not know what the percent grade is here. It's not as steep as the east slope over by Horseshoe Curve, but it's still pretty significant. And the all the heavy eastbound trains all need either a DPU or they still have man pushers here.
Can you explain dynamic brakes to me?
No.
I still don't understand dynamic brakes.
It has to do with the electrical system.
Yeah, I know.
Right, and reversing the I'll say the flow of the electricity to dissipate through the dynamic brake grids some of the energy. But I'm not an engineer.
Okay. Do you have to be an engineer to explain them to you?
If you don't understand them, like me.
Well, the reason I bring that up is because first off, you said we're on a grade, which really, from our vantage point here on the porch of the Cresson Inn, the station inn, in Cresson, Pennsylvania. What's the population of Cresson, Pennsylvania?
I'm going to guess about 1,000.
Seems like kind of a happening place for a small town.
Well, there are 2 universities nearby.
Okay.
Small universities. Mount Aloysius College is just literally less than a mile from us, up on Old 22.
Right.
And St. Francis College in Loretto is about 4 miles from us to the north. So there's a little bit of that activity. There's a couple of industries here, right? There's one right down the street. There's another one up the hill. So there's some jobs here, and
there's a fairly big Y and turn. Where does the tracks go from the Y? Is that the connection to R.J. Corman?
That's right. Yeah.
So
right,
where does
Cresson
that...
Secondary, I think that used to be called under the Conrail term before they sold it off.
Right.
But ultimately, that's made up of a couple of different former Pennsylvania Railroad and New York Central branch lines, and the biggest place it leads to is the town of Clearfield, which I don't know if you've ever been on Interstate 80 across Pennsylvania, but Clearfield is one of the more major stops along the way. There's an ethanol plant in Clearfield.
Okay.
And so a lot of the R.J. Corman business is grain that comes from the Midwest, corn.
Right.
And then gets brought to the ethanol plant, and then the empty cars return. And that was that empty grain train that the gondola cars ran into the other day.
One of these trains would come in. There'd be a switching train, a local train that would come in, drop the grain cars, and then Corman takes them the rest of the way.
Yeah, there's a tweak on that. They run it as a unit train, right? So it's a road crew that takes the train from Conway right to Cresson.
Right.
And then they get cab back to Cresson, and then they get cab back to Conway. And then R.J. Corman comes down with 1 or 2 of their locomotives, which they add on the front because their line has a lot of grades and curves.
Right.
And then they take it north up to Clearfield. Now, their line continues. They have other branches that continue. And ultimately, the other end of their railroad is at a place, Keating. It's a Keating on the Buffalo line.
Okay.
And so they do some coal loading on the Corman line, but most of that runs out via the Buffalo line, and goes right down. The Buffalo line follows the Susquehanna River.
Right.
You remember Ken McCory you interviewed a little while ago? His model railroad is based on the Buffalo line.
Yes.
And the coal runs down the Buffalo line and then on what's called the Port Road, and ultimately ends up in Baltimore where it's loaded onto ships.
So it's fair to say that Corman has a connection from here to the Buffalo line.
Yes, it's like you could literally run a train from pick a point like Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, go up the Buffalo line onto Corman and come out here at Cresson and then go back to Harrisburg. It's physically possible. Not that anybody would do that, but it's physically possible.
Or you could run a train from down from Buffalo, and then where does it meet the Buffalo line?
Keating.
Keating, which I'm assuming is near the Keating Summit.
It's not right next to it, but it's in that ballpark. Yes.
Yeah. So they run from the Buffalo down to Keating and then across their stretch of track, and they could come right out here on this gigantic main line that's owned by Norfolk Southern.
On a map, you could do that. Yes.
On a map, yeah. I'm not saying they would, but on a map.
Sure.
It's starting to rain a little harder.
It really is. Yeah.
You're starting to
back our chairs up.
I haven't felt anything yet. Have you?
Yes.
Oh, okay. You're a little closer.
Don't worry, I'm not going to melt. I don't know about your microphone system, though.
I'm shocked that you guys got to see a runaway train.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't happen very often, right? And it's a real mystery why it happened. There was nobody working around there, and the cars had been there all day, if not longer. So, Norfolk Southern was out that night, and then again the next yesterday morning investigating and doing whatever repairs needed to be done because that grain train did leave here yesterday afternoon, as did the two errant gondolas. A local crew came in and picked them up and took them down to Altoona.
Okay. And do you know where Dave was while these gondolas became loose and started rolling down the track?
I believe he was right here on the porch with just about everybody else.
Okay. Ralph Heiss was here?
Yeah.
Okay, just checking, people's whereabouts.
Yeah, no, I think most people were here.
So now I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
We're doing these interviews. We're sitting here at Cresson, right in the middle of our 37-part trilogy of Ken McQuarrie's layout, who is a wonderful gentleman, by the way. Ken seems to be just a very personable chap.
He is, yeah, I agree.
And I'm really enjoying interviewing him. It's a lot of fun because he speaks up. He's got a lot of enthusiasm. Just seems like a nice guy.
Yep, he's a very nice guy, and he's always made me feel welcome as someone that, I haven't known him my whole life, just for a few years. And I enjoy going down to the railroad.
So how did you first get an invite there?
Ken came to the Onondaga Cutoff.
Oh, that's right. You were telling me, yeah.
Yeah. And so it all comes out of that.
Okay. And you said, geez, I wouldn't mind operating.
No, he offered before I said anything.
Really?
He just said, hey, if you ever want to come down and operate on my railroad, let me know.
Okay.
So,
he must have seen your skill and how adept you were
I wouldn't have been operating at Dave's. I would have been, giving out jobs and stuff like that.
Exactly. So you must have given him some nice jobs.
As my recollections, he didn't want to run anything. He just wanted to watch. But
okay. So, anyways, our last conversation with Ken, we were talking about the trains, and you'd been there 20 times.
Maybe. I know somebody who's been there more than 100 times.
Yeah, well, we're not talking to him.
Well, you might be able to, though.
Who's that?
Doug Watts.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Absolutely. Doug is a regular, he has some regular higher-level roles there.
Really?
So.
Oh, we might have to get Doug on one of the Ken McQuarrie 37-part trilogy parts.
Sure. Well,
we'll find out if
since he's here today, you can ask him.
I could interview him, and in that interview, I'd just very kind of slip it in.
Yeah.
Hey, Rich and I and Kelly are interviewing Ken McQuarrie. It'd be great to have you on there with us.
Sure.
And he'd say, well, isn't it crowded? And I'd say, well, we'll get rid of Rich.
That would be fine.
No,
Doug has a lot more to offer.
No, he doesn't have more to offer than you, Rich. This whole I can't help thing is really starting to grow old.
It's kind of like being called the Whiz.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but that sticks. Explain to me a little bit more about this. Like, when I was driving here, I was thinking to myself, I can't believe that in the early days of railroading, that the Pennsylvania would stop here with passengers because there's nothing here. And I would imagine back in, like, when would they have stopped? When would have been the heyday of them stopping here with passengers?
In the early part of the 20th century, I would think.
Like the teens and the 20s?
Yeah,
30s?
30s, right.
And back then, I can't imagine there was more than like 6 people here.
Well, I don't know. I mean, as I understand it, we're located across from what used to be the Cresson passenger train station.
Yes.
And the fact that this inn is situated here, I think, is no coincidence.
No.
I'm sure it was here for travelers. Cresson has a reputation. You know, it's up in the mountains here, and it was the cool mountain air in the hot summer. People from the city would come and stay in lodges and things like that. So, that my guess is that was most of the market.
I wonder what the elevation here is.
It's in the 2000s, but I couldn't tell you exactly.
Yeah, I passed some place where I passed some Allegheny Summit sign on 219, just south of Du Bois, and it said 2053 or something like that.
Right.
I don't really see that as being mountains. I think out west they'd kind of giggle a little bit.
Sure.
Snicker at us calling it mountains.
Having just spent a couple weeks out west, I would agree with that.
That's another. We got to get you on the regular podcast for talking about your last trip to the Cumberson Toltec. And you seem to wander around quite a bit, either before or after.
Yep. I spent a week in Washington State traveling around with my daughter, doing a lot of hiking. Then a week at the Cumberson Toltec, and then a couple of days of just more exploring in New Mexico and Colorado.
And were you doing that by yourself?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Well, that's going to be a great podcast. It'll at least be a great 30 minutes.
Sure.
It will be.
Yeah.
So explain to me this tunnel thing here. Like, I'm just fascinated that in a days gone by, the Pennsylvania Railroad would have gone to all the trouble of building a tunnel to get people from, I'm assuming those were westbound trains on the far side, and they'd unload. And there's a tunnel sitting right in front of the station inn. There's a tunnel that goes down and under the tracks and back up.
Yep, it's pedestrian underpass, and I think you have to put yourself back 150 years when before they made a lot of improvements here. I'm sure people just walked across the tracks at a little grade crossing, and my expectation is that in order to eliminate that grade crossing, they had to make an improvement. There are plenty of these types of facilities in New Jersey. Oh yeah, sure. Some of them have been eliminated over time as the railroad usage has changed. One I can think of is a next Lackawanna location called Lincoln Park, New Jersey, that used to have, in the 20s, they expanded the right-of-way to 4 tracks and built a pedestrian underpass by the station. But as time went on, the freight business pretty much went away, and it became a Monday to Friday commuter line, and almost everybody drove to the station, so they eventually eliminated the underpass.
Right. Fascinating. It's fascinating that they would build. I'm fascinated by a time before World War II when steam trains were still being built. There were no computers, and it was all done by slide rules. And, it just amazes me how much was accomplished before the dawn of computers.
Yeah, railroads especially, right? Everything was a big investment, and everything had to be justified. I don't know what the statistics they used to justify it, but just up the tracks here to the east of us, there was a flyover that used to exist, simply to allow trains coming off of the coal lines, now R.J. Corman's lines, north of Cresson, to get across to the east side of the railroad and go east without interfering with the traffic.
Right.
That bridge was finally eliminated in the 1990s when Conrail went through a project to allow for double stack clearances on this line. It was one of the things that got removed.
And is that when Cresson became, or a Gallitzin tunnel became a single track, pretty much, to get the double stack?
Yeah, they did the work at Gallitzin at the tunnels then, right? I don't remember the names of them, but the one on the north side was closed, and the tunnel in the middle was improved to allow for 2 tracks for double stack clearance through it.
Because, like, when we're sitting at Altoona, there's like 4 tracks, you'll see. Oh, I know what I was going to ask you. You'll know this answer to this question. At some point, we were watching Heath's video last night, and he had drone footage, and it showed 2 trains, but they were on different double-track mains, and they were separated by trees. And do you remember that scene?
I believe that was Scott Sorensen's video.
Okay.
His drone, and I'm pretty sure that was taken at the east side of the tunnels, where they, because there were 3 tunnels at the top of the mountain. One of them is now closed, and the 2 that remain are, I don't know, half a mile apart.
Okay.
Right, and so on both sides, the tracks spread apart to
Right.
match up with them. And I believe we were looking at the video. I'm sorry, the drone footage of the east side of the tunnel, where the tracks sort of get close back together.
Okay. And you know a lot of stuff.
I like to think I'm pretty observant, but
There you go.
I don't remember what I had for dinner last night.
All
so.
right. And have you ever figured out why men's eyebrows grow so much? Because that was a question we had posed to you.
As I recall, the question was about why does the hair color change differently? Right, because
Right.
we were talking about beards and things
Yeah,
like that.
exactly.
Yeah,
And we said, well, there's only one guy to ask. Here's something that I'm just gonna mention this. It's completely off topic, but a few days ago we recorded Viewer Mail Flight 103,
okay.
and at some point Brad Williamson was with us. There's a guy you got to give a wide berth to. Just if he
I don't know. I was reading his Facebook. I think he lost 15 pounds this summer.
Well, no, yeah, but I mean, if he wants to be pals with you, I mean, wide berth as in if he's on one side of the street, you stay on the other side of the street. And so, anyways, we're doing it, and we're reading one of his emails, and he's talking about he has a whole bunch of pictures of Conrail because rail fanning during the Conrail days was not really that popular.
I don't know. That's when I started rail fanning out here.
Right. So, do you have tons and tons of Conrail pictures?
I have lots of Conrail pictures. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, how long have you been coming to Cresson with Dave?
With Dave in this weekend event, it's only been 6 years.
Okay.
But I've been coming out here to rail fan in general, this Altoona area. My first trip was 1984.
Wow. So how long did you know Dave before you came out here?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we've worked together for 20 years.
And only 6 years ago he invited you?
That could be right.
Wow.
Or I wasn't available. I don't
We'll have
remember.
to investigate that.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's some sort of a riff there that he wasn't telling you about.
Who knows?
So okay, you were rail fanning Conrail, but don't you feel like it wasn't nearly as rail fanned as it should have been?
Well, I do think that the folks who were very interested in the rail fanning in the 70s, when Conrail came along, Conrail obliterated their favorites. It obliterated
Right.
Erie, Lackawanna, Lehigh Valley, CNJ, and I guess for some even Penn Central, right? So the folks of that generation disdained Conrail.
Okay.
Right? I started as a railroad enthusiast in the early 80s, so Conrail was already there.
Right.
So while I have an appreciation for and really enjoy some of the history of some of the predecessor railroads, Conrail was the railroad that I knew growing up.
Okay.
The freight railroad.
And when you say you started being an enthusiast, how old were you when you started?
I was almost out of high school.
All right. And do you remember why you started being a rail enthusiast?
Oh, yeah, that's a very interesting story, in my opinion. It all started because I was in high school. I had playing on the soccer team, and I decided I wasn't interested in playing soccer anymore. So I quit the team, and my mom said I had to get a job.
Right.
And I got a job in a local store, and in chatting with the manager, I said, yeah, trains, they're pretty cool, but I was not really into it.
Right, yeah.
And then a couple days later, he showed up with a box of model railroaders and railroad model craftsmen because he was cleaning out his spare bedroom because his wife was expecting their first child. And really, more than anything else, that's what started me on the journey of being interested in the railroad and really my whole adult life.
Right, yeah. I was just going to ask you a really good question. Oh, yeah. You'd be a great person to ask this question to, and I'm sure I've asked it to you before, but as you know, I have this incredible knack of being able to erase my brain like a memory card. So to me, everything's fresh. Like in another 10 years, this podcast is going to be great for me because every person I interview, like, have you ever been on this show before? It'll be like your 14th time. Does this not seem, rail fanning and model railroading, does it not seem way bigger to you than it's perceived to be?
Well, I do feel that in some ways there seems to be more young people involved
Yes.
than when I was younger. but you see that, of course, because of social media.
Yes.
The flip side to that is because of social media and the ability to interact with people all the time, the more traditional organizations that were a real entry portal for me, like a National Railway Historical Society or a Model Railroad Club, I think they're struggling.
They are very much.
Because it's a different type of interconnection people have electronically. And, while some might say, well, maybe their time has passed, but many of those organizations have preserved equipment or memorabilia that has a real value to the historical story. And it's a real challenge to get the younger generation interested in participating in that. But we need that. Otherwise, this stuff's all going to get dumped in the scrap bin when the people that are passionate about it move on.
But you could also make the argument, because of younger people connecting through media and clubs and such, and societies may be struggling, the strong ones and the good ones will survive. Just like some shopping malls are dying and some shopping malls are thriving. The good ones will survive, and maybe the quality of the hobby itself will increase, because those rundown railroad historical places where they have rusted out equipment and they call themselves a railroad museum, they'll go away, but the quality ones will stay and maybe increase the level of the overall quality of the hobby to begin with.
Yeah, I definitely think that's going to happen in some places.
Here comes a train. What's coming?
This is the Amtrak's Pennsylvanian.
Oh, yeah. How fast is it going there? 50?
I would say about that, yeah. Daily train from Pittsburgh to New York City. I left Pittsburgh at 7 o'clock this morning. And it's a couple minutes late, I would say, based on what time it is now.
And how far is it to Pittsburgh to the west?
100 miles by rail, I think. I think it's around 350.
Don't look to Josh. You got to learn to do this.
I think it's milepost 350 is about Pittsburgh. Yeah. Okay. So as the railroad, 300. It's about 100 miles. It's less if you're driving. It's the highway straighter.
Sure. And how far is it to New York City from here? To the east,
340 miles.
Okay.
Right, because we're at milepost 251. That's measured from downtown Philadelphia.
Okay.
And then it's about 90 miles from Philadelphia to New York City on the railroad.
So how would a railroad decide where their milepost numbers are going to start? Like, that seems a little obscure to me, that it starts in Philadelphia, goes up to New York, makes a left-hand turn towards the west, and that's where the milepost numbers start in Philadelphia. I think I have a really good question after you answer this one.
The mileposts and direction on the railroad are critical bits of not just engineering information, but safety information.
Right.
In order to keep everybody safe, everybody needs to be speaking the same language, and so railroads designate the direction on a line in their general order or timetable.
Right.
So that everybody knows that no matter which way the tracks are facing on a compass, west is that way, right?
Right.
So that there's no confusion. And similarly, the mileposts are important for giving out locations for work zones and things like that. Because the rail lines, there's so much information that's key to the mileposts. Like this concrete underpass, pedestrian underpass that we were just talking about. In the engineering books, that has a
milepost.
It has
mileage.
Yes, exactly. It's probably 250.98, if I were to guess.
Yeah.
Right? It's 150 feet from the milepost. So if you're going to change that milepost to reflect a new business condition, you're changing all of them.
Right.
It's a lot of work. You're changing all your all of the maps and reference books that you have. So as a result, these old systems hang on.
Okay, so the reason they started it in Philadelphia, the milepost 0 is in Philadelphia, heading west towards Pittsburgh, is because
it was the Pennsylvania Railroad, and Philadelphia was the center of the Pennsylvania Railroad.
Okay, so pretty much all their lines, mileposts started in Philadelphia, went from there.
If the line started in Philadelphia,
okay,
that makes sense. Yeah,
sure.
Right.
All right. I'm interested. It seems kind of odd that it would go. I would think that the line from New York City to Pittsburgh would be a main line on its own.
It's not.
Right.
Right.
Apparently not.
New York to Philadelphia to Washington is the Northeast Corridor. It was the old Pennsylvania Railroad main line to Washington. But from Philadelphia west out to Harrisburg, that was truly the Pennsylvania's main line. The communities there were called the mainline suburbs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Villanova and places like that. So the through connection between the New York side of the world and Pittsburgh and West was not the dominant traffic. It was substantial back in the day. Today it's one train each way.
Yeah.
But it was not the predominant flow of traffic.
Trains are just endlessly fascinating, aren't they? I mean, they're these massive machines that ride on 2 inches of rail.
Yeah.
It's the magic of trains is magical, and I'm not sure we'll ever figure out why. All right, Rich, I think we probably killed like a half an hour. Let me see. Let me look on the big clock. We have, for those of you who've never been in the studio, we carry this portable studio, and we have a giant clock in front of us, and then we have all these walls that we erect, and nobody's allowed in. It's very technical. We talked for 31 minutes.
Okay, well, it's a good way to pass a rainy morning.
It's it's raining. It's actually kind of a cool time to be sitting on the porch, if you ask me.
I agree.
I think it's really neat. All right, say goodbye, Rich.
Goodbye, Rich.
Okay, so now, as we continue with the Cresson Chronicles, and I'm sitting on a rocking chair looking out over the Norfolk Southern main line, I'm here with the proprietor of the Station Inn on Front Street in Cresson, Pennsylvania.
Why, hello.
It's getting bright. I think I better put my sunglasses on.
Oh, Dave's
here.
Dave is always here.
So when did you buy this joint?
May of last year.
May of 2022.
Yeah.
So last year when we had our little shindig, you were already the owner.
Yes.
But a lot has transpired since then.
Yes.
And how has the experience been so far?
Unexpectedly rewarding.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. I was expecting it to feel more like, the old joke about the two best days of having a boat is the day you buy it and the day you sell it.
Yeah.
I was a bit afraid that this would have a similar tack, if I can make a boat joke.
Yeah.
And that's probably the only boat joke I have. So anyway, no, the community of people who come here make it a lot of fun, and everybody's been very supportive of the little tweaks that we've made over the last year.
Yeah.
And it's just a lot of fun to be part of helping people come out here and hang out and spend time together and watch a couple trains roll by.
It seems to be getting more popular.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of now I have to actually ask you permission for something that I've already done.
Okay. Retroactive. Oh, I think they call that forgiveness, actually.
Yeah, exactly. So I send out shirts to $10 a month Patreon members, and I also send them a whole pack of stickers.
Okay.
And one day I was sitting on I was doing something with the Station Inn's website, and I saw the circle emblem, and I thought, hey, that would make a cool sticker to send to people, and then they'd know about the Station Inn. So I made 1,000 stickers, and I gave a bunch to Dave to give to you.
Okay.
Did he ever give them to you?
No.
Really?
That Dave's a bum, actually. Yeah.
Did he really not give them to you?
No, I'll have to ask him about it.
Jeez.
No, he didn't.
Oh, my God. Well, there's like 200 stickers in a Ziploc bag for you.
Cool. All right.
Yeah. So I made these stickers, and I hand them out about the Station Inn, and it's a replica of your circle emblem.
Awesome.
Is it okay if I do that?
Well, I guess it'll have to be, but I can send you files for a few different things.
That would be cool. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Dave never gave them to you.
No.
Oh my God.
No.
That is like that. Now I'm embarrassed. I relied on Uncle Dave, to do this for you.
Yeah, it didn't involve his model railroads. So
yeah, I know. It involved somebody that was involved with him in model railroading.
That's true. That's true.
So, okay, so a year's gone by, and it's been relatively busy?
Yes, business has been picking up. We've had a lot of people who had heard of the place over the years and, I always meant to get out there, and now I heard you were here. I saw it somewhere on the internet or wherever. Thought I would check it out. We've had a number of people who had been here once or twice, say 10 years ago, and similar version of the story where they wanted to come back, but for whatever reason didn't come. COVID hit, all that sort of stuff. And so there's been a lot of renewed interest in the place.
Well, that's cool.
Since we've been here. So it has been cool. Bookings are definitely up. I don't have any figures because they were just bad, the last year that it was in operation before. So, and, you can only go up from there, arguably.
And has it taken away, has it detracted? Are you crazy busy now? Because you don't live here in Cresson. You live near Pittsburgh, correct?
Yes, my wife and I live about an hour and a half from here. And Aunt Pat is our innkeeper. My wife's Aunt Pat lives here.
Yeah, I remember she was here last year.
Yep. So she's around somewhere. And, so she handles the day-to-day management of the place. And then we have a wonderful staff who make everything happen. So Chris cooks breakfast, and Michelle Sheehan is housekeeping manager here. She makes a lot of things happen. And then we added a second housekeeper, Saraya, about a year ago, and she's got a wonderful British accent. She's awesome. She's awesome. And she's helping to cook now, too, so that when Chris is up at the camp or on vacation or what have you, Saraya is going to be able to cover breakfasts. And so it's been a lot of fun because some of those are names that had been part of the place in the past that we were able to bring back.
Okay.
And I think that for a lot of the long-time guests especially, that helped send the right message that we're keeping it in the original spirit that Tom Davis intended.
Right, because the original owner was Tom Davis. He started the station in some 30 years ago.
That's right. July 15th, 1993.
There you go. And so almost exactly 30 years ago of this recording. And as he aged, and the last few years, it got very hard for him to keep the inn in any kind of operating condition.
Yep.
But now you're here, young blood. How old of a man are you? 72?
It feels that way sometimes. 46.
Okay, so you're going to be at it for years and years and years.
Yep.
Is that the way it's starting to feel a year later? It's I'm really glad I did this.
Yes. There was a time early on that I thought, what the hell are we doing?
Right.
And it got, it did get tough for a little while, juggling 4 kids and full-time jobs and all of that. But as we completed the renovation of the basement, and as the 30th anniversary party that we held 2 weeks ago, as that came together, which was a ton of work, it's been really rewarding to be able to see all this tangible evidence of the last year and a half worth of hard work, and to see all the people come and the endless compliments. Oh, we love this, we love that. I hardly noticed that it was different, but yet I see that it is. I think Heath said that. And so it's been a lot of fun to see people come and enjoy the place, and I find that energy and excitement helps keep me excited and engaged in it too.
So how often would you come? How long does it take you to drive here from your home?
About an hour and a half.
So not terribly.
Yeah, it's you basically take Route 22 and you pass, I think, three strip clubs and 6 Sheetses and maybe 5 McDonald's to get here, something like that.
And are they any good?
I haven't actually. The Sheetses are good.
That's what I meant.
Yeah. I haven't had the courage to try any of the other establishments.
So how often would you come here?
Well, I would say before Tom got sick, easily every couple of months.
Really?
6 to 10 times a year.
Just
when Tom was doing well, my wife and I got to be fairly good friends with Tom.
Okay.
And so we would come up, and the 3 of us would go out to dinner, and especially before my wife and I had our own kids, we would come up and we'd do different things in the area. And then once we had our own kids, it was more likely that Tom would come to our place for Thanksgiving weekend or Christmas weekend or something like that. And then, as Tom got sick and everything, then things ebbed and flowed in different directions, partly based on who was here kind of taking care of Tom, taking care of the place. It was harder to be social with Tom, partly just because his health was ailing.
Sure, just because his health was ailing.
Sometimes he was, sometimes you'd come up here and he slept the whole time and you didn't really see him. And
right.
other times he was his sharp, lucid self.
Sure.
And it just hit or miss.
Typical old age.
Typical old age. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he passed away at the age of 90, so I'd say he did okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that video we saw that Heath made, then he would have been about 80.
That's about right.
Yeah. So, I
and
mean,
he was a
looked
pretty spry
sharp.
80.
Yeah, he was a very spry 80.
That's right.
So how did you discover the station in?
The same way I think Dave did, the ads that Tom had run in Rail Pace.
Okay, so you
Yeah.
came here separate from Dave and his whole gang.
Yes, in fact, I hadn't met Dave until about 2003 or 2004
Oh, okay.
because of Tom.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. He had some sort of regulars kind of meetings.
Yes. So Tom would have what he called an old timers weekend every February,
Right.
where he would invite his buddies, most of which were from the Black River and Western, where he volunteered for many years in New Jersey.
Okay.
But he would also bring in people that he liked and people that helped out with the business in various ways. And so I think it was in that latter capacity that I was invited initially to that group because I managed Tom's website since about 2000.
Okay. Yeah, I like the website. It actually seems to work pretty good.
So far, so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. We're in the process of switching web people as we speak, actually.
Okay.
So it's going to get another
It seems
revamp in
like
the community.
you're kind of picking up speed. You're kind of like growing into this. You're kind of like
Yeah,
embracing it.
definitely. Definitely. I come away every weekend with ideas and enthusiasm, which is, compared to a year ago, I would come away from a weekend with a long list of things to do, and that started to get a little old, but we also knew it was a hill to climb.
Right, yeah.
As you get it done, then you can... Some of the ideas are more exciting and bring new features as opposed to fixing leaky toilets.
Yeah.
Not so rewarding. But I've gotten good at it.
Yeah, I guess you had to learn how to do a lot of
Yeah.
stuff yourself.
Yep. Which I am reasonably handy to begin
Okay.
with. So I can do a little bit of electrical, a little bit of plumbing. I hate plumbing, but I can do a little bit.
I don't think I mentioned your name. Your name is Alex Lang.
Oh, that is my name, yes.
Yes. I'm not that good at podcasting. There's a whole lot
Well, I
of...
listened to it a few times.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of, you got to introduce people, you got to tell people their names. And
You can always edit that, though, so that's easy to fix. Fix it in post.
No, nah, can't be fun. So don't you work in the railroad industry somehow?
Yes.
What is it you do?
So my career is... over the course of my career, I've been in information technology, so
Okay.
IT. I don't build programs. I put things together to make business processes work.
Okay.
So I did that for Carnegie Mellon University for about 13 years. That's where I kind of got my legs and got a master's degree. And then I started working for short line railroads about almost 10 years ago now, doing technology for freight railroads.
And how did you end up making the transition to short line railroads?
Well, partly from our friend Mike Filoni, who's down the porch here. Mike works for a company in Pittsburgh that was looking to do some technology projects.
What is that company called?
That's Carload Express. That's
Yeah,
right.
That's a cool company.
It is a cool company.
They have like 3 or 4 short lines.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So they're owned by, it's privately held with a very visionary, passionate owner, and so it was a great place to come in and we did positive train control.
Right.
We implemented train dispatching. We put in a radio system. We got to do, and I was part of the team that helped start the railroad in Delaware in 2016 when we took that over from Norfolk Southern. So that was a really, really rewarding experience.
Which railroad is that?
The Delmarva Central Railroad.
Delmarva Central.
Yep. So it runs from almost the north end of the state all the way down through the peninsula into Virginia.
Can I ask you a question?
Did.
I'm still trying to. Yeah, I did. Try not to be funnier than the host.
Oh, well, that might
Try
be
not.
hard.
Yeah.
It might be hard.
Yeah.
I like to kid around.
I know. You're doing a great job with this place.
Oh, thank you.
I'm having a ball.
Good.
And we're talking about you joining the AML crew in Springfield.
Yes.
I was just talking. I went out to Horseshoe Curve with,
The guys?
The guys.
Oh, Uncle Dave?
Uncle Dave and I can't even think of his name now. He was standing right beside me. I interviewed him not that long ago.
Doug?
Doug Watts.
Doug Watts.
Yeah.
We like Doug Watts.
Yeah. Why couldn't I think of his name?
Well,
That's
it
part.
happens.
That's the way the podcast is going to go. It's just going to slowly deteriorate into nothing.
Well, I could never work in sales because I'm terrible at names.
Yeah.
I can't be the innkeeper. I can just be the proprietor.
Right.
For that reason, among many reasons.
So a railroady question.
Yes.
That has plagued me. So I was just doing an interview with Otto Vondrack, and we were talking about Doyle McCormick and his PA that he sold to the Genesee Valley Transportation Corporation.
Yes.
GVT. I'm not an acronym guy, but that's what we ended up calling it. And I said to Otto, and this is something that, how does a company, say the size of GVT or Carload Express with their little short lines, say they get a boxcar and they have to deliver it to one of their customers that's 12 miles away. They shove it down there. The guys unload it. Now it's empty. They bring it back 3 or 4 days later. Like, how does a short line make any money doing that? Like, is there at some point do they get a hold of the car is theirs and they get to charge what they want, kind of thing?
The specifics of that they range depending on the circumstances and the location, but there's really two pieces at play. One is that all the railroads are beholden to the Association of American Railroads interchange rules.
Okay.
So there's a standard framework by which things like car repairs and interchanges and inspections are all expected to be managed. So in order to be a player in the rail industry, moving freight, you must follow these rules.
Okay.
Part of that includes access to a set of software systems run by Railink. Railink is a subsidiary of AAR, and so all of the data that flows between railroads, most of it flows through Railink. So when that car is delivered from, say, Norfolk Southern to GVT, there's a standard process of data flow where GVT gets a copy of the waybill and they figure out how much they get paid and who gets paid and when they get paid and all of those steps,
okay,
including the notifications that the car is ready for pickup, the car has been delivered, the car has been emptied, the car goes back. All of those things flow through a number of software packages that end up connecting with Railink in one way or another.
Okay, so would the simple layman's answer be when Chrysler or whoever the big company is says they hook up with Norfolk Southern and they want their car shipped to Joe Blow something or other, the rate is already set and GVT gets their cut?
So there's two common ways that this is handled from a money perspective. One is where typically larger carriers are each part of the routing of the car and each have their own ability to charge their own rate. So if you're shipping from the West Coast to the East Coast and say it's short line to Union Pacific to Norfolk Southern to short line, if the short lines are larger companies, they're actually on the waybill as their own entity charging their own set rate that they don't have to negotiate with anybody.
Okay.
The smaller companies, conversely, will act almost like a subcontractor to a Class 1. And this is particularly common if the short line only connects with one Class 1. So the smallest companies essentially are paid by the connecting railroad at a negotiated, often pre-negotiated rate. Might be an annual contract that says, okay, I'm a tiny railroad, I have 3 customers, and so the price per car for this customer is X, for that customer is Y, and this customer is Z. Okay. Now, if you're leasing your tracks from that railroad, as is often the case in these newer deals, then you don't have any pricing power at all. If you own your own tracks, you have a lot more pricing power.
Okay.
But ultimately, the total cost of that freight has to be competitive with trucks, and so there's a lot of push and pull around how much and by whom and all of that in order to make these things competitive.
So is this a fair statement? Would people be kind of shocked to find out that to send a boxcar from Los Angeles to Cresson, Pennsylvania is a much more staggering amount than they could imagine?
Mike is actually a better person to answer that, but I would say it's because that's what he deals with every day is setting those prices and dealing with when a customer has a new source of material and it's a different place, maybe a different set of railroads. Mike would help to figure out how much is it and who are the players and all that. But when you figure you can haul about 3 to 4 truckloads in a boxcar.
Yeah.
And so the pricing is going to be slightly less than 3 to 4 times what a truck would have cost.
Okay. All right. Look at that. It's still working.
Well, that's good. So,
all right.
I mean, something like, I don't know, it also depends on the commodity that's being moved. And so things like stone and coal require less, it's different handling, it's, lower cost material, so the freight rates are going to be lower, whereas more semi-finished chemical products are going to command a higher rate, partly because of the care involved in the equipment needed or the care involved in handling them, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, hazmat would have kind of a higher charge because there's more risk associated with that.
Yeah, because, I mean, even if you take a small railroad that has bought used locomotives, a good used locomotive is a lot more than a car.
Oh, yeah. A good used locomotive is somewhere in the $250,000 range.
Yeah. So, I mean, you'll see these smaller railroads with a half a dozen or 8, and you're thinking, okay, that, and they got they might have 40 employees and cars and stuff, and you're thinking, well, how are these guys making any money shoving these boxcars a few miles down the road? But it's making sense now.
Yeah.
So let's get back to the inn. What are your immediate plans?
Our immediate plans are to do nothing and rest on our laurels for a couple of months.
That's a good idea.
We put in a lot of time and energy around planning the 30th anniversary party that we held 2 weeks ago for the community in Cresson.
How'd that go?
It went very well. We had essentially a street festival. We closed Front Street.
Okay.
We worked with the mayor and borough council and the fire and EMTs and police department. And we had the chief of police in a dunk tank. We had several food trucks. We had all sorts of tents of community vendors and the Boy Scouts and all these kinds of things. We had free games for the kids. We had a bouncy house. We had live music. It was a really fun day.
It must have been rewarding.
Very. And we had Vale Wood Dairy, which is nearby. Great local. That's where we get all of our dairy products from. They served ice cream out of the bar.
Wow.
And Juniata Brewing served beer out of the bar, as God intended. So it was a great day.
Was the bar the first place you kind of turned towards to fix it up when you got here?
Well, the first thing we had to fix up was the ceiling because it was cracking in the common room.
Okay.
It was... So that's when we upgraded the lighting in the common room. After that, we had a lot of basic plumbing and heating and 2 hot water tanks and a number of minor repairs throughout the building. But yes, my first real interest is getting the basement fixed up, which now stage 1 of that is done. So
the
dining room area is finished, and we are going to start to... I guess the next step for us will be to put together a business plan around renting that space out for... hopefully hysterical societies or, volunteer, like railroads that rely on volunteers to maybe come and do their training class here, rules classes, book training, that kind of thing. But we're open to, baby showers and bar mitzvahs and whatnot too, to help the community out.
So probably 4, 5, 6, 10,000 people are going to listen to this because I'll put it on the free channel because we want to publicize
thank you.
The station in. Is there something you want to tell people? I mean, this is listened to all over the world.
Yeah.
The sun never sets on the AML Nation.
Operators are now standing by.
Exactly.
Well, if you haven't come to the Station Inn, it is a place to come and relax, watch the trains come by. You don't have to go after the trains unless you want to. They come to you. Cresson's a small town where you have lots of pizza options. If you like pizza, come to Cresson. But, in all seriousness, you sit here on our front porch. The main line's 150 feet. Yeah. It's at eye level.
Oh, it's
great
unbelievable.
Place to watch trains.
I think it was Doug Watts. I remember his name now. I think it was Doug Watts that I was sitting here talking to, and I said, the main line's like 100 feet from us. I'm sitting in a rocking chair. It's exactly at eye level. It's kind of like watching trains in a movie of trains.
Yes.
Except it's 3D, and you're right there, so you're getting the sound and everything. And, I mean, there is no shortage of trains going by here.
And part of the fun of it here is that not only is it a busy main line, but it's at the crest of a mountain grade that requires man helpers. And so it's one of the few places left in the nation that has a busy helper operation. And so that adds a few extra train movements a day. It definitely adds to the sound and the wonder of watching a train. And because it's on a mountain, there's 3 main tracks. So, I got here the other night and 3 trains were passing at the same time, with a 4th sitting on Old Main or on 5 West over there.
Yeah. Have you thought about, this is an idea, have you thought about maybe making some sort of a track plan of the tracks that are around here?
That's an interesting idea. Yeah, I mean, there's maps that people can look at, but there
It'd
isn't
be
really
pretty
a diagram
cool.
or
It'd be
anything.
pretty cool if there's like somewhere on the wall there you had like a
Right, you are here.
yeah.
And
this is and you could put this idea was an idea of Lionel Strings.
Right. This map brought to you by AML.
Yeah, there you go. I love it.
We can figure something out. We just need a graphic designer who likes to draw maps.
Yeah.
I think we might know a couple people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's neat. So so when you come to Cresson, the trains are easy. They're plentiful. They're interesting. Then you've got a lot of good restaurants within walking distance. You've got the beer distributor. You've got the wine and spirits shop. So if you like alcohol, which I do, you can walk to that. We're hoping in the next year or two to get a liquor license for the bar and actually
really?
have that open as a
That'll be cool.
a lounge. So to that point, Tom had the bar and restaurant open for a period as the yard office saloon. We've decided it will be the yard office lounge. So
yes.
we're going for a
You're going upscale.
a little bit upscale. Then there's a few reasons for that. One is we think it fits with the kind of folks who are coming here and want to relax. It's also in keeping with the come here, stay here idea, right? This is a destination B&B. People come here. Some will stay 3 days and not leave the porch.
I can believe
it's just a
that.
relaxing place to be. And so we want the basement, the venue, the bar and restaurant to be the same idea where you want to hang out, do a board game, do a puzzle, or BS with your buddies. Eventually, we'd like to come back to having live music, every so often. And so timing on all of this is still kind of up in the air, but we're considering having coffee lattes, espresso available in the mornings, and then switching it over slowly to cocktails and a couple of beers on tap and things like that in the afternoons. And, of course, if you put the two together, you get a pretty good espresso martini, which is in increasing popularity these days. So I think there's room for something like that. And it's different. There's a lot of bars around, but a lot of them are sports bars or biker bars. They're more of a bar-type environment. We're looking for something mellow. There'll be interesting music playing. There'll be... we think some of the college students might come and hang and do their homework a little bit.
Yeah, tap into a local community as well as people travel, as well as rail fans.
Exactly.
I just had this thought. Maybe I was thinking about it 10 minutes ago. But I think as we wrap this up, I think what the emphasis should be, and as we talk to each other through the years, the emphasis should be you're doing this because you wanted to own an inn. I remember you telling me about that from your wife's past. But also, really what you've done is you've saved a rail fanning landmark.
Yes.
And the rail fanning world needs to be thankful and try to come out here and support. Well, not but appreciative because you're putting a lot of effort in here, and trust me, if you're a rail fan, you would love sitting on the porch. You don't have to come for 3 days. You come for 2 nights. Spend the day sitting on the porch watching trains go by. You are not going to be disappointed.
And you won't leave breakfast hungry.
That's
that is
true.
not an option.
Man, there was a lot of fresh fruit.
Tons of fresh fruit. Always a hot breakfast. Not just, something easy and carby for breakfast, meat and eggs and all that. And so
which is included in the price of the
bed and breakfast. It's all in the price. That's right. The other thing I'll say is that the rail fan community has been saddened by the loss of a certain unnamed lodge that's out in Glacier Park.
Yes.
See what I did there?
I got you there.
And they've in the process of their path into the future, they've sold off a lot of artifacts, and that people are worried it's going to lose its charm. And so, I'm here to reassure everybody that you want some of that charm, come to the station.
This is absolutely a rail fanning spot of it's. I mean, I know this isn't the intent, but it's almost a throwback to yesteryear.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, that is part of the intent. Yes, where people talk to each other, exchange ideas without getting into a keyboard war.
Yeah.
And in fact, so many of us here in this group this weekend, developed and honed our careers, got career advice, got relationship advice on this very front porch. And so that's one of the things we want to foster is maybe up-and-coming future railroaders coming and getting advice from experienced railroaders. And, hey, there's a job opening over here. And so encouraging networking in a professional and semi-professional way.
If I had come here as a child, my eyes would have been bugging out of my head. My eyes are bugging out of my head every time a train goes by. And, I mean, everybody was so excited. Not that long ago, one went by and it had a Kansas City Southern locomotive on it. And everybody's going, KCS, KCS.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, you got to come here to understand it.
Yes,
But
that's true.
You will not be disappointed. This is... You won't be, because you guys have really improved it a lot.
Well, I have to tell you, one of the things that surprised me a bit is the number of people, now that we're all over Google and TripAdvisor, it's easy to find us. You can book online. You don't have to call and wait for somebody to call you back. You can see the rooms. You can book what you want. And we're getting a lot of people who aren't rail fans. They're getting, it's maybe a couple that just likes history and they want to see Horseshoe Curve. Like, well, let's get in the spirit of that and stay at a railroad bed and breakfast. And they love it. We've had guys who do little motorcycle tours to go sightseeing across Pennsylvania. They've loved it. We've got a lot of families who come by whose grandfather used to work for the railroad, or uncle so-and-so had Lionel trains. So there's a familiarity and appreciation. We're seeing that all throughout our culture. There's an appreciation and a longing for simpler times when you can come here and live that for a couple of days.
And I'll go, and to that effect, what I say is this hobby and the interest in trains and railroading is way bigger than anybody realizes. Al Gore invented the internet specifically for model railroading.
That's right. That's right.
And all these people are joined together. But, I mean, and just briefly, I don't want to hold you any longer, briefly, explain to me, this used to be an actual station on the Penn Central. Or
Pennsylvania Railroad.
Railroad,
well, and so we are across... When you look at the main line, there's an underpass, a pedestrian underpass, that was part of the Cresson train station. That's how you got to the platforms on the other side.
Yeah.
So the train station was right across the way here. And so our building was built in 1866 by a guy named Callan, and it was built as a hotel for weary travelers coming from the railroad.
Right. And so the station was right over there somewhere.
Yeah, up platforms. I'm not even sure if there was much of a building.
Right.
But platforms and one of those little sheds.
And people would come out of New York City on their way to wherever, and the train would stop here. And
that's right.
If they wanted a night's rest, they could do it here. And do you know when that underpass was built?
No, if I had to guess, a lot of the changes that have created the modern main line happened in the early 1900s, like 1903, 1904.
Wow.
Lots of the bridges, lots of the tunnels. So if I had to guess, I would say somewhere in that time frame. And anybody who's listening who might have any influence over this, I would eventually love to get an Amtrak flag stop here so that you could actually get off the train and come right to the B&B. But that's going to take some lobbying.
Yeah. But that's cool that you have that in vision. I mean, when I talked to you last year, you seemed like a little shell-shocked.
Yes, I think that's accurate.
And now, the first thing I noticed this year is like, okay, he's got this under control, and he's on his way now. They're on their way. They got it figured out. They know which direction they're going, and improvements are already being made. And I mean, this is. I hope you own it till you're 90.
So do I.
Good.
So do I.
All right. Well, I guess that's it. How much longer have we been talking? We've been talking for like almost 40 minutes.
Oh, wow. That felt like 5.
I know, it does. It's so much fun to be with me.
It was. Appreciate it. Thanks, Lionel.
All right. Say goodbye, Alex.
All right. Goodbye, Alex.
Okay. We're continuing with the Cresson Chronicles. This is the last segment because we are here with the proprietor of the Cresson. What do we call this, Dave? Uncle Dave is here. What do we call this? We are right now sitting on the porch of the Station Inn watching a eastbound loaded coal train full of, like 1,000 hoppers. We just had the DPUs go by us, the mid-train helpers.
Yeah, the rear help will be coming here shortly, and we got a westbound stack train, which looks like what used to be 23M, or maybe it's a 257. I can't. The symbols keep changing. International stacks, and meets in front of this inn are regular, several times a day, sometimes 3 train meets in front of the inn.
And I mean, we're sitting here at eye level. We're track. Our eyes are like right even with the track. And
you can see through each freight car truck. You can watch the roller bearing spin, which is a favorite pastime of mine.
Yes.
One of the strange things that I enjoy about watching trains is roller bearings. And you can study it. It's a perfect speed to look at each one, look for old road names.
Now, earlier, you were trying to tell me something about some of these are rebuilt, like that's a 3-hopper, 3-bay hopper.
They were all built as drop bottoms.
Right.
Not all, but this train was all built as drop bottoms. some of the older drop bottoms were cut off and replaced with big troughs at the bottom to raise the amount of capacity for the car.
Okay.
And it allows them to fit 125 tons of coal instead of 100 tons.
Right.
Which is better for everybody as far as the railroads are concerned because it's more freight.
Right, and then they put them in a rotary dump.
Rotary dumper. The whole train will be rotary dumped here. This is a train on its way to Baltimore from southwestern Pennsylvania, from the Bailey mine outside south of Pittsburgh.
And like this Conrail car, you see it says
Yep. G52X.
And that means it was rebuilt.
That particular series was rebuilt. So Conrail had a huge freight and passenger car shop that they inherited from the Pennsylvania Railroad and Penn Central. And those shops were kept busy by rebuilding entire fleets of cars for Conrail. They did box cars, they did flat cars, they did tank cars, and all sorts of things. One of their big projects at the end of Conrail was the G52 series, and there's 5 or 6 different versions. There's the G52L, G52J, G52X, and again, basically raised the capacity of a 100-ton hopper to 125 tons, give or take, which allowed them to ship more coal on the same train, which cut their rates.
And when would that have been done, those G52X trains?
My understanding of the G52, the early ones, the Ls and such, were the mid-90s, 93, 94, 95.
Okay.
The X's were 96, 97, 98, if I recall. It's really right at the end of independent Conrail.
All right, let's listen to this. Exactly. They got this, just like we talked to John McGuire, whose interview may or may not have been broadcast yet. The step lights on those Norfolk diesels, Norfolk Southern diesels.
And those are also rebuilt in Altoona at the Juniata shop. Those are rebuilt from old Union Pacific engines.
Oh, really?
Into engines that NS uses for helper service out here. So it's a pretty incredible railroad area.
It's an unbelievable area. I was actually the interview, the segment before, we listened to the proprietor,
Alex Lang.
Yes. The proprietor of the Station Inn, and I was suggesting to him that maybe on one of these walls he could put a big map of the trackage in this immediate area.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
That's a great idea, actually.
Yeah.
And if you go inside, most of the rooms have some paraphernalia and some information. There's certainly plenty of books about it, but there's nothing wrong with having something mounted up here on the front porch.
Oh, I think it'd be cool.
We were talking a little earlier with Matt Davis. Tom Davis is the former late proprietor's nephew.
Right.
And Matt was like, I don't understand, how's that west? And it's like, well, Railroad West and Railroad East are often different than geographic west and east.
Right.
Because the whole point is moving, freight here between western waters. This railroad was built to capture tonnage freight west of Pittsburgh and bring it up a reasonable grade, down a steep grade, and get it to Tidewater and the metropolitan areas on the east coast of the United States. So to get from west to east, you don't go in a straight line on a railroad because the grades are critical. You can't pull up that steep a hill. The less steep the hill, the more effective the railroad in almost every case.
Right.
So this is one where, in this particular location, the tracks are much more north-south than they are east-west.
Yeah.
It's still generally southwest to northeast, but we're looking straight out across Front Street at the Pittsburgh line on Norfolk Southern, all 3 mainline tracks and a long siding track over there, and we're looking pretty much northwest.
Yes. And
not west.
And when you're sitting here, the grade is almost indiscernible.
Yeah, by railroad standards, it's not insignificant. You're almost a percent right in front of the inn, and 2.5% is about the most reasonable mainline grade in mountains. If you get over 2.5%, you're not going to be able to move big trains.
But the size of that train, that 3 on the front, 2 in the middle, and 2 on the back. It had 5 units, and it was barely moving.
Yep.
Maybe 10, 15 mile an hour.
That was a double barrel train. That's the nickname us rail fans call it. It's when they take 2 trains and put them together, front to end.
Right.
And so the DPU, the distributed power units in the middle, are remote controlled by the head end engineer. Those are actually the start of the second train. So that's almost 200 125-ton hoppers.
Yeah.
So you're over 20,000-ton train.
Yeah.
And going up's not the problem. You put enough power on, and you're going to go up the hill.
Right.
Gravity has no friends.
Yes.
It's coming down where you have to be careful, and that's where these men and women that run these things, it's a craft.
It is a craft. It's no different. It's the same as flying a passenger airplane.
Yes, I agree.
You know, the same kind of responsibility. You can do a lot of damage if you take your mind off the
Absolutely.
your eye off the ball.
Yeah, everybody can do it when it's easy. It's when it's hard that you have to count on the smart people.
So last night we saw a video that your friend Heath Horowitz. No, how did
Hoffmeister.
Hoffmeister.
Yep, Heath Hoffmeister.
I think this podcast is only going to get worse as I get old, don't you?
No.
It certainly hasn't gotten any better.
Well, we're transparent about our difficulties here at the old AML.
Yeah.
And, accuracy, we're accurate when we can be accurate, but if we're not accurate, well, that's okay.
That's really of no concern to us.
It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
And Heath is a master videographer. He's a great editor.
And he's artsy. He's very artsy.
Very archy. But I think that one of the luckier strains of my life has been becoming such close friends and acquaintances and co-working
Yes.
with a guy that's also a top-notch videographer. So I'm, my sundry philosophies and things are very much knitted into the fabric of some of the stuff that he's done over
to
the
give
years.
people an indication of what Uncle Dave is like, Heath is one of your subordinates.
Correct. He works for, he's basically, I'm his boss's boss's boss.
Right, I understand that,
Yeah.
but he is under your...
He reports up to rail stations, yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly, and
Yep.
they report to you and blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and so that's a feather in your cap that you enjoy interaction with people outside your place of business.
It's true. I mean, we met, as we've talked about, I met Heath in 1999 through my brother.
Yeah.
They went to college together. So I actually knew Heath before he hired out on transit. And he came through a different department to get onto transit. But once he was there, he's a good writer, and we do a lot of contract work. So I need contract people that can write and read and interpret a contract.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It's really important. It takes a lot of people to make a railroad work. And reading and writing is critical. That's a strength that he brings to the department, 100%.
And how many employees would you have underneath you?
About 150.
Right, and that includes the managers of the stations,
And all the custodial staff, some electricians, some plumbers, some carpenters. And then about $12 or $13 million of contract employees besides that.
on top of that.
Yeah, service contracts that we
Okay.
have. And those are the contracts to which I speak. Other employees in the department came up through the ranks as a custodian or an electrician.
Sure.
They know their union agreements really, really well.
Right.
And I rely on them to manage those people. But Heath brings a very literary approach to things, and that's critical for these big contracts, for service contracts. It's a heavy responsibility, and he does it well.
I've told the
Oh,
story.
here comes Amtrak West.
Okay. Oh, yeah. That's another thing, too, is these trains, a lot of these trains, these locomotive engineers love being part of the station inn and blowing their horn and carrying on. Oh, yeah, I was going to ask you. So Morgan Pavia took a picture of the station inn.
Okay.
And you didn't seem that impressed. He was on the Amtrak train. He was doing a little tour around the world, around North America via rail. And I sent you the picture, and you didn't seem that impressed.
Oh, I said that's awesome. It was a picture from the train, right? The
Yeah,
one,
yeah,
out
yeah.
the Amtrak window. Yeah, I
Yeah.
responded to that.
Oh, okay.
I don't think Morgan didn't send it to me.
No, I sent it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, am I usually impressed?
Well, you're usually more enthusiastic.
No.
It's real. So I had a really good question for you. Hang on a minute. Don't tell me.
Were some of your questions not so good?
Some of them can be. I will never claim to that, but seeing as how nobody's listening right now.
It's very rare that I get to ask that. So every once in a while,
exactly.
sitting here with the evil overlord, it's fun to be able to.
Oh, yeah.
push
I know
back
what I was going to
sometimes.
say. What I really liked is when time I went to Penn Station and the interaction you had with your employees.
Yeah, one of those employees, Bob Driscoll, has retired, and so a major source of weight on my shoulders these days is guiding the process to select and then train a new superintendent that will run the department for me.
Would you prefer an in-house guy, or would you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that'll come together. There's a couple excellent candidates. I want to see how they behave in the next couple months, and we'll have the interview process is one where we're going to build questions that test knowledge and test experience. And I'm fortunate to have a very effective team. What I do is impossible with one person, and railroading in general is. So having the right people in place is critical to harmony in the department, and a department that can handle discord. Because, again, when everything's fine, it's easy.
Oh, yeah.
It's when things get difficult that you really have challenges. You need people you can rely on.
Yeah, and now in this particular case, will you be the guy that gets the final say?
Yes.
Okay. And
Yes.
will you at one point sit down, you just one-on-one with the person?
At some point, yeah. I mean, my style is to, once the interviews are conducted, I have the final say if there's a tie.
Right.
But it's going to be a team of people that interview.
Right.
Everything gets scored and ranked, and then the winner's the winner.
Oh,
so
okay.
I get the final say if it's close. The manager's input means something.
Right.
But it's up to me to craft questions and interview situations that are going to draw out the strengths that I need for the department. So it's, a lot of people say, oh, you already know who you want. It's like, no. I mean, of course you know who you don't want. But you do know that there are people that rise to the task, people that can handle the hard times as well as the good. It's a delicate process.
I've had this dream 2 or 3 times where you're looking for somebody to replace somebody, and I'll be like a second or third in command, and everybody's telling you hire Lionel, and you're going, no, that guy's like a loose cannon rolling around the deck, and I'm like, Dave, you're on the podcast. What are you talking about?
Well, if you ever want a job in rail stations, I think it's still out there on Indeed.com, Lionel. So feel free to throw your hat in the ring.
So last night we saw a video that Heath Hoffmeister made. I'm having an Angry Orchard cider. And it was about the 30th anniversary. You've been doing this for 30 years, where you originally started out at the age of 17.
Correct.
And when your mother was ill, and your dad was very preoccupied with all the things that were going on in the family.
Yep.
And you had found the ad in Rail Pace magazine.
Correct.
Tom Davis had bought the place and put a little ad in Rail Pace magazine. And you sort of hoodwinked your dad into going... Not hoodwinked. He was preoccupied.
Yeah. I asked him. He said, sure.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. And so I called the station in and made a reservation for Labor Day weekend.
Yeah.
1994.
And then your mom called
Mom, I hung up the phone, and Mom said, where are you going? I said, to this place called the Station Inn. It's out by Horseshoe Curve. She's like, did you made a reservation? I said, yeah. She's like, well, we don't know where this place is. I said, well, I do. I can get there. But of course, at this point, I have my driver's license 6 or 7 months.
Right.
And this is a 5-hour trip from home at that time.
Yeah.
And I'm taking my brother, who's 14. Well, he turned 15 before we came out. But, 3 14-year-olds and then 2 17-year-olds. We're
Right.
making this trip in the family minivan. The Ixter, the white Woody minivan that we're all familiar with from the Sundry Onondaga Cutoff podcast, or not just podcast, but the Facebook Lives as well.
Facebook Live events that you do.
So, that was 30 years ago. And this year, for the 30th consecutive year, Mark and my brother Ben and myself are here together. And the guys from the original trip are here. Guys from the second trip are here, third trip, fourth trip, all the way out. And every year, we fill every single bed. And a couple of people aren't able to make it for family commitments or what have you, but there's a waiting list, and so it ends up being, it's my job to fill the inn for the innkeeper, and that's what I do.
So, can I ask you a really personal question?
Of course.
Because this has kind of been rolling around in my head for a while now, and you just kind of described it again. When you came the very first time, your mother was already very, very sick.
Yes.
And with cancer.
Correct.
Like, that just must have been brutally hard for you and your brother.
Yeah, it was a little slice of hell on earth. Yes. And it's important to note that, I don't know, I've long believed that people's pain is very personal, It's something we all deal with, different things in life. And whether you're in 8th grade and got dumped by your first girlfriend or boyfriend, or you lost your mother to cancer, if that's the greatest pain you've been through, then it's the same pain. So it's not like any particular pain is better or worse or should be taken more or less seriously. People struggle with darkness. In a world where things are so easy, so much of the time, we struggle with darkness. And, naive 17-year-old me was Mom would do better in the summers,
Right.
and worse in the winters. She
Right.
really struggled in the wintertime. Multiple myeloma, bone marrow cancer was what she was dealing with. And back then, it was much, much more primitive. The way they handled it was draconian
Yes.
and heavy-handed. And so she would be better off in the summer months, but each winter she got worse through the 90s, and it was real tough. The winter that followed our first trip to the Station Inn was the one that she never recovered from. Yeah, that was the change in early 1995, and she died in May of 1995.
Right. So your first trip was 94.
Correct.
So, can I ask you another tough question?
Of course.
Does this have some? Because every time you tell the story of the first time you came and you were like a 17-year-old and you went, hey Mom and Dad, we're going to the Station Inn.
My dad did call, by the way, and make sure that it was kosher, that the innkeeper knew that like 2 17-year-old monkeys and 3 14-year-old monkeys were going to be coming
Well, and I'm
out.
sure your mother went to him immediately and said, what's going on here?
Oh, well, she made my dad call.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. Yep.
She was probably the catalyst to that.
Yep.
So, can you describe that connection that you 29 years after that, your mother's been gone?
Correct.
But does that, every time you tell that story, is that something like, and my mom said?
Oh, yeah. There's as much heartache in it as there is a chuckle.
Yeah.
It's like all good things in life. Like, it's bright and dark at the same time. And it's amazing to me. This inn has out-survived both of my parents. My mom never saw it, but my dad came out for years after my sister died.
Oh, did he?
He didn't miss one. After my sister died in 2006, and Dad came out that summer. She died in June of 2006, and my dad came out in July of 2006 to spend time with his sons because he had put us aside.
Be preoccupied.
To handle my sister just 8 years. My sister was a mess for years before that too, but the weight of that was amazing to watch my dad carry that and learn from the stability that it brought my brother and I to know that stuff was taken care of.
Yeah, and that's why your brother had such a tight bond. You and your brother had such a tight bond.
I'm very fortunate, and he, even in the pandemic, we met here that summer of
Right.
2020. He and Mark and I, all three of us were here with a bunch of guys that were willing to take that chance to get together despite the risk. And I'm proud that we did. It was the right thing to do. This place there's no air conditioning. There's no TVs in the rooms. It's hot and sticky when it's hot and sticky.
Yep.
And it's cold as hell. Outside, it's cold. And the steam radiators clunk and clank all night, and it's still hot inside. So because there's no air conditioning, the windows are always open. And we spaced things out with less people. So I felt very comfortable here during the pandemic. It wasn't a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
It's the kind of place you want to be when there's a pandemic. Big open front porch, open windows. So all that worked out. But yeah, I miss my parents daily.
Well, and I don't want to be too heavy, but it's easy to hear you tell these things. I think it's because of the lilt in your voice and the way you present it. But after you dealt with your mother, then your sister who was already ill, and she struggled for a few years after that.
Yeah, it was even worse than Mom.
Yeah, can you describe to people that there is a light at the end of the tunnel?
You just have to get up in the morning and put your shoes on and take one step every morning. It is your responsibility to do that. You don't get to choose not to do that. It's a choice we make because nobody gets out of this thing alive in the end of it, right? So you can't predict the next problem. And this is a shadow I still struggle with. I feel that every time I deal with my kids, and when my kids get sick or Cresson gets sick, there's a shadow. There is a brand, like a cattle brand on my soul from those losses.
Yeah.
And I find myself arguing against myself. How can I best protect my family against this kind of loss? Bottom line is you can't. You do what you can every day, but you can't allow the shadow to control what you're doing in your life. You have to find a way to show up. And showing up requires you to do what you can for other people. You have to get out of your shell and take that first step. It's just like going to somebody's operating session.
Right.
Okay? You have a responsibility at somebody else's operating session to help bring their dream to life. It is your responsibility to do that.
It's one of the
You don't have to go. You don't have to go. And it's okay if you don't want to go. That's fine. But when you do, you better show up.
Yeah.
And life, I am firmly convinced that life requires us to show up. If you choose not to show up in life, you're negating your responsibility.
You should try to always live like it matters.
You have to live like it matters because it does to somebody besides you. It's not about you. It's about other people.
You need to do everything like it matters. You need the way you shop for your groceries, the way you drive your car, the way you eat your sandwich. You got to do it live like it matters. Because one day, when it does, you'll be ready.
As ready as you can be.
Yeah, as ready as you can be.
which is probably, to be very transparent, you're going to be very poorly prepared.
Yeah, you're going to think you're ready, and you're not going to be
But
ready.
there is no such thing as a plan that works without changes. But you can't have a plan at all if you don't have one to start with.
Yeah.
So when things get rough and you feel like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, do yourself a favor and get out of bed.
Yeah,
Take the first step.
make your bed.
And see what comes out of it.
Yeah.
It is a responsibility. We don't get to determine when we go. That's not our responsibility.
The simplest task of making your bed can make you feel better.
Yes, 100%. I never like getting into a bed that's not made.
I know.
I make my bed here at the inn.
My mother was not a working. She was a World War II veteran, and British in the WAFs. And is there a train coming?
Westbound.
Oh, another train coming.
Yep, it's a 3627, NS 3627, which is a GEVO, modern Tier 4 compliant engine. And 1166 is an SD70 AC. I love the way those sound. You hear the dynamic brakes because it's going down the hill.
Right. How do dynamic brakes work? Is there a layman's way to explain that?
Yeah, the electric motor on each axle runs through a bank of electronics, and normally the diesel prime mover drives an electric generator, and those motors consume electricity to turn the wheels.
Right.
It's a diesel electric locomotive. Dynamic brakes change the electric motor into a generator. The generator now the weight of the train is pushing. You put it into the dynamics. You switch the electric field on the motors. The motors now are working against the magnets instead of drawing from them.
Okay.
And the power that's generated is dissipated in heat
All
up
right.
to a big grid that bleeds the heat out the top of the locomotive. And what you hear is the fans. The radiator fans are turning on to dissipate that heat.
That's why those early RSD 4.5s, those hammerhead
Yep.
RS3s.
Well,
That's what they house a lot of the dynamic braking in the nose.
So the only hammerheads, and Mark, my friend Mark, is the resident Alco expert, but hammerheads are RSs that have two things: dynamic brakes and steam heating equipment for passenger service.
Right, yeah.
So if it was just dynamics, they could fit it in the long hood. If it was just steam heat, they could fit it in the short hood. But if you have both, you needed the hammerhead to fit it.
Okay. There's so much, this hobby's growing like crazy.
It's so much fun. It's great.
All right, quickly, I want to say about this video that Heath made about the 30 years. Was really good, and he had done an interview with you, from 10 years ago.
Yep.
And I always give you a hard time constantly about your golly gosh style of, getting up in the morning. I'm always... But it's like, I thought he did a really good job of capturing the essence of Dave, which is, you got to believe.
You have to believe. Even when you don't, you have to make yourself believe in something. And this is a cryo-comp trailer. My kids would be so excited. Awesome. All right.
What's a cryo camp?
Cryo-comp, whatever. I don't know how to say it. They're cool trailers because it says from Allerton, Wisconsin to Edison, New Jersey. I think they either make cheese or some sort of meat product, and it's a refrigerated trailer, and that train's 29G. Like, I know that train now because that trailer was on it. And so my kids love it, and so it's become this thing when we see cryo-comp, we all go, cryo-comp!
And do you get, I'm assuming every night you guys, you give your kids some sort of quiz about trains?
No. I'd get in trouble for that. No, I do. I never thought of it as a happy-go-lucky or howdy-doody approach to things. I'm just filled with gratitude at the way I grew up.
Yeah.
I feel very, very fortunate to have had the parents that I did, the brother and sister that I did, and that of the 2/5 that remains, me and my brother. You don't get to choose those things, right?
No.
But the fact that it's those two, I can make it. I can make it. I'll get there because my brother, he carries the same baggage I do in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. And then on top of that, you had to be the big brother.
Yeah.
I would imagine there were some times in there when you were trying to explain to him the way life worked.
Yes. Then there was a time that I was trying to tell him that when you squeeze the toothpaste tube, you do it at the bottom of the freaking toothpaste. Why would you squeeze the top of the toothpaste tube? And to this day, you go to his house and the toothpaste tubes look like something the dog chewed on. Like, dude, roll. Is this that difficult? So yes, we've had all sorts of debates over the years. Ben doesn't mind if his bed's not made.
I love my favorite. Yeah, I love my favorite. My most recent favorite Abelese family story is the two guys. So you get air conditioning in your house after hundreds of years.
Yeah,
you get it installed.
Beautifully.
Works great.
Yep.
I mean, you got a beautiful home. And I mean, man, if you ever want to sell that home, somebody will absolutely fall in love with it. And so you get air conditioning. And your two guys decide that they're going to, on July 4th,
the two boys,
Yep. Decide they're going to set the temperature to 64 degrees.
Because they want to cool the attic off so they can show our parade guests, for Independence Day parade. It happens in Lebanon every year. It's a great parade. And they want to show everybody their Lionel layout, which is up there in the attic.
Right.
It's a finished attic.
I get it.
So we put the air conditioner up there. And they put it down to 64 because they wanted to cool it off quick so they could have their friends up there. But they didn't close the windows. And they forgot to turn it off. Which normally is going to mean a $500 electrical bill for the month, right? Which is enough. But it wasn't enough. Because it's also how we discovered that in repacking the attic, a crate had been shoved through the condensate line for said air conditioner. And so while we were air conditioning central New Jersey out of my attic, we also were draining all the humidity that was in the air into the ceiling above Susie's room. Yeah, the last 2 weeks we're going to be relaxing, and it just didn't work out that way.
So let's give people just the tiniest glimpse into real world Dave. Like, just how mad were you when you discovered what they'd done?
I was mad at them, but I was mad at the contractor for leaving an unprotected condensate line. I was mad at the person that repacked the attic, because it wasn't me.
No.
I'm not going to use any names.
No.
I was mad at...
All right, I did it. I was there. I was trying to help, and I repacked the attic.
And I was mad that it happened on a Friday ahead of us trying to go away for the weekend with the kids to go to an amusement park. And I come home, and Susie called me in a panic, and I come home, and sure enough, the ceiling's sagging and dripping black water. And it was... I was not happy.
So do you remember the first thing you said to those guys?
It was a very heated, what are you thinking? Why are the windows open with the air conditioning on? And then, Pete's looking at me with his big blue eyes.
Has probably a puppy dog look.
Teddy's looking at me with, exactly. I'm sorry, Dad. It's like, you keep saying you're sorry for things, and they don't change. I don't think you're sorry at all. Like, sorry means you're not going to do it that way again. I said, you guys are not good family citizens. You're not pulling. I try and do so much to this house and make it nice for us, and you screw it up. And it was hard to not use railroad language.
Right. Yeah.
I managed that though. I think, if I recall,
it'd probably be one of the times they remember forever and ever and ever. Because I remember the 3 or 4 times. There's 3 or 4 times with my dad that I had really screwed up, and he was like, he came home and he's like. At one time, I decided I was going to paint his nephew, whose dad had left the family.
You're going to paint his nephew?
No. His nephew had decided he was going to paint his car in my dad's garage.
Oh, good.
But before he did it, he had set up the, this is the late 60s. He'd set up the paint thing and all this stuff. And I thought, you know what? Before he does it, I'm going to paint my wagon red.
Yeah,
So I took this car-sized paintbrush, and I start painting my wagon. And, of course, I'm painting everything in the garage at the same time.
Oh, my God. That's a good one.
And he comes home, and what I remember the most is I'm in the garage. And I just went, "Hey, Dad, look at my wagon." And all he could do is stand there with these saucer-like eyes, and I'm thinking, why isn't he telling me what a great job I did?
Oh, my God. Yeah, my band director in high school is a mentor of mine through those years. Wise guy I go to for advice. Somebody I call a wisdom keeper. And one of the things he said to us at one point was, make your mistakes with conviction.
I like that.
That is a mistake made with conviction. I say, well done, sir.
Yeah. All right. Have you got anything to say? This is the last part of the Cresson Chronicles. This is the last word of them.
Everybody listening should do themselves a favor and go into stationinpa.com. Take a look at what Alex and his wife Leah are doing with the Station Inn. It's becoming more family friendly. It's becoming more of an open door policy. That things are in better shape. The railroad is busy, interesting. The local restaurants are pretty good. This is a great spot to come to watch trains.
Yeah, it's a decent little town with decent little restaurants.
And when you're an hour off 80, you're an hour north of 76. Make time to cross paths with the Station Inn. You won't be disappointed.
No, absolutely.
It's been great, and I'm very grateful for 30 years of a great time here, and here's to 30 more.
I actually believe Alex is going to be here for a long time.
I think so too, and I had my doubts. He's got a young family of his own, much closer to here than mine. But I was like, boy, I think that's more than you can chew, man. You really, and I told him, I said, you might let somebody else take the hit for this. When your kids are older, you can look to buy it.
Right.
No, but Alex. He's got a lot of faith in the way he does things, and I'm impressed.
There's been a big change even since last year.
It's exciting. Things are working.
Yeah.
Instead of me having to worry about these things, now it's just taken care of.
Yeah, and in fairness, when I talked to Alex, Tom, the owner, passed away at the age of 90. So the last 5 years that he owned it, it was very difficult for him to maintain it.
Yeah, he wasn't maintaining it.
No.
That wasn't. He was very ill. Then there was the pandemic. His health bounced around quite a bit. There was times we came here and he was in the hospital the whole time. He wasn't even here.
Yeah.
So, again, for this to pass to the next generation, my mom was alive the first time I came here.
Yeah.
I was in high school. I had my first car. My layout was a 4x8 sheet of plywood in a spare bedroom at home. My brother was 15. Like, this place has spanned 4 decades now for me.
Well, who was I interviewing? Somewhere in this Cresson Chronicles, I was talking to somebody about Jack Trappuccino, and somehow about your dad, and then we reminded ourselves about how your dad dumped his girl. What was the lady's name where the layout was?
Oh, Babbies. Yeah.
Babbies.
Yeah. That was a Peter Abeley's moment.
Yeah. He dumped her at her granddaughter's graduation.
Yeah, at the graduation itself.
Yeah, after the graduation itself. Yeah.
We choose to get out of bed one foot in front of the next. We also choose our timing, and I hope that I've learned a few things about how not to do it from my dad.
Say goodbye, Dave.
Goodbye, Dave.
Well, Rich, what did you think of that?
I was completely entertained, at least by the second 2 interviews.
How are you about listening to yourself? Does it bother you? Does it annoy you? How are you?
I don't find my listening to my own voice that enjoyable.
Yeah. Here's the way I originally thought of when I was listening to myself in the early days of the podcast. Holy mackerel, am I boring? And then through the wonders of technology, I was able to make myself sound slightly more interesting. But I enjoyed telling this story. The very first time I ever did on-the-spot interviews was the RPM meet in Chicago some 8 years ago. 7 years ago, maybe. And I'm driving home, and I had loaded them up on the phone so I could listen to some of them on the way home. And I was talking to Matt Herman, who at that time was working for ESU. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this guy is annoying to listen to. And I'm listening to it, and I can remember distinctly, I was somewhere near Gary, Indiana, on the interstate, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I got to turn this off. Like, I can't listen to this guy anymore. And then suddenly I realized it wasn't Matt Herman that was annoying. It was me. I was like, because Matt was a talker, which is great, and which is what we want. But when there's guys that like to talk and are very interactive or very engaged, all you can hear is me in the background going, right, uh-huh, yeah, right, uh-huh, yeah. And I realized, and I thought, man, that's kind of scary when the most annoying person on the podcast is yourself.
Yeah, that's not what you want to hear.
So,
but that was a number of years ago, and I think you've obviously grown as a host. And let's face it, right? I mean, who's someone who talks all the time when he's on your podcast? Uncle Dave, right? But you stay with him, and there's a two-way banter there. If somebody came on and just did their own soliloquy for an hour, that would not be interesting. It needs multiple voices, whether it's you or whether it's you and Bruce or whoever. The diversity of what you hear helps to make it more interesting.
Or me and Rich.
Yeah, whoever else.
You have a great radio voice, by the way. You know what?
Nice of you to say.
If I was of the female persuasion, I think I would fall in love with your voice. But okay. I don't think I'd make a particularly good-looking woman. So we've all caught a break there. Yeah,
that's for sure. Interesting conversation, Lionel.
Absolutely. That's what I love about it. That's the way I listen to some of this stuff, and I love listening to this goofy stuff. And the reason it's goofy is because of the life I've led, and it's like at this point, I really don't care. I just like talking.
Mm-hmm.
And but I have thought of, while you were talking there, I have thought of a great question. I have never asked this question ever on the podcast, and this is a question that I know many people will love to hear the answer to. And I want you to try to be as honest as you possibly can. You met Dave through work at New Jersey Transit. You both worked there.
Yep.
From what I understand, it was a lunchtime thing where Jack and him used to show slides, or you and Jack used to show slides, or somebody showed slides, and somehow Dave got into the group, or you got into the group, and this was a semi-regular lunchtime thing where somebody would bring in slides and you'd watch them. Is that correct so far?
Yep. Myself and two other friends, Al Tillotson and Lou Milan, we were like the three amigos there. We had lunch together probably every day for 10 or 15 years until, different things changed within the company that didn't make it as practical for us to do that. And then there were other people in the office that we knew enjoyed the railroad more than just as a job. And so, somebody would go on a trip or whatever, and they'd bring in a box or two of slides, and we'd get together in a conference room and check them out, have our lunch. And that's Dave and Jack came into that world because they were younger guys that were just starting out, and that's how we really met. I'm sure I met Dave before that, just walking around, but in terms of spending an hour and realizing, hey, there's other people here that like trains, I think that's where that came through.
So here's my question. There must have been times over the years, either at work or somewhere else, you guys are on the road or something, where it's just you and Dave having lunch, or it's just you and Dave having in the car, or it's just you and Dave having dinner. What's it like being with Dave and having a conversation with Dave? Like, you just basically sit there and nod the entire time, or
no, because while Dave is a good talker and he likes to talk, but he's a really good listener. and he wants input and thought from other people. So no, it's not like that at all. I mean, he may have a long segment of something that he wants to say, but he's saying it in order to get a reaction out of me or whoever he's with, to continue the conversation. He's talked about in the past about people who seem to be reaching out and asking for information or advice, and then they promptly ignore all the advice that he had to offer, and that's kind of frustrating. So no,
Yeah,
he's a very good listener.
You know what? Along those lines, 100 years ago, almost 30, I had a convention in my hometown of Barrie, Ontario, and I decided the reason I had the convention was for one reason and one reason only, to invite Tony Custer and Alan McClellan to be clinicians. And then I would get Alan McClellan and Tony Custer into my basement to look at my layout. It was quite devious. That was the entire reason why I had the convention.
And this is where you had the big limo?
It was where we had the limo, yep. And on the Friday, we were going to go look at a couple of layouts and look at a couple of hobby stores. And so one of my employees, his wife had a limo. She had her own little limo business. And so I hired her and she just pulled up, and this limo pulls up, and I said, "Hey, look at that. There's some rich guy. He's got a limo. I guess there's a wedding or something." And then, of course, me being me, I said, "I'm going to get in and see what it's like." So I just climb right in the limo, and I stick my head out the door. I say, "Hey, come on in, guys. This is pretty good." And away we went. Now, where was I leading with that story? Oh, yeah. So Alan McClellan was in my basement before Tony had arrived. So it's just me, Alan, and we were talking. And he said to me exactly that same thing. He says, lots and lots of people ask for my advice, but rarely do any of them take it, which he said I find to be incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, I can see why.
And you also mentioned that Dave is a great listener. And last Tuesday, we had a fireside chat with Chris Wayman, who is a fellow that lives in Chattanooga, Tennessee, works for U.S. Express, has the same enthusiasm or possibly more enthusiasm for trains and model railroading that Dave does. And he also is a talker, but he also has the same great feature where after he's finished doing his talking, he's interested in what you've got to say, which is the key. That's the key. I have described Dave to many people that way. Dave loves to talk. He loves to tell you what he's thinking, but he also is desperately interested in what you have to say. So, you all you have to do is remember to put your stuff into about a 3-minute slot, and you'll get him excited about something, and away he goes again.
Yeah. I just on a side note, I was really felt fortunate to be able to meet Chris at Springfield this year, and get a few minutes to chat with him and to meet him. And yeah, he's definitely someone who's got a lot of enthusiasm for the hobby, and especially for much like Dave, the modern rail fan, how that translates into the model railroad.
Now, when you and Chris were talking, did either one of you discuss Rapido trains?
Your fast track to model railroading fun.
Rapido trains, your fast track to model railroading fun.
So anyways, I think that's it. I think we've got it covered. We listened to 3 great interviews, which by themselves were about an hour and 35 minutes. You and I did a little intro, and we talked about the Northeast Corridor and electrification of the Northeast Corridor and what electrification actually is. We described to people all over the world where the Northeast Corridor is. I think we covered a lot of ground in this particular podcast, Rich.
We did, Lionel. Could I ask for 2 minutes, though, to just talk a little bit about clarifying some of the things I think I said in that interview about the railroad near Cresson?
I'm sorry, the network says we're out of time. Well, hang on a minute. Let me put in a quick call to the executive producers. Let me put in a quick call to top brass and see what they say. In the meantime, we'll play our commercial for Rapido trains.
Sounds good.
In the meantime, we'll play our commercial for Rapido trains.
Your fast track to model railroading fun.
If it's N, if it's H-O, the fast track is Rapido.
Okay, Rich, I have put in a call to the top brass of the network, and they do say, in fact, you do have 2 or 3 minutes to describe whatever it is you have to get off your chest, whatever it is.
Sure. I just wanted to clarify. I did some research since we conducted that interview. You had been asking about some particulars about the railroad. The grade of the railroad near the station in through Cresson for the 15 or so miles from South Fork up to Cresson, that grade is 1%. I think I had given a higher number in the interview. And the grade coming up from Altoona through Horseshoe Curve and up to the Gallitzin tunnels is more like 1.75%. For our overseas listeners, that would be a 1 in 57 grade.
That's fascinating. That's awesome. I thought I remember you saying 1%. Here's something I often think about. Here's something I love about our friendship. I would say our friendship has blossomed. I would say that you and I could go to a Giants game or a Toronto Maple Leaf game or any sporting event or any kind of event together by ourselves without anybody else and actually have quite a good time.
No, I'm sure. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And yet, we're two opposite personalities. You're very much about getting it right and being correct, which I very much admire and wish I was like that because I'm not. And I'm not.
Right, but it's more than just whether something is right or not. I mean, you're certainly a more outgoing and gregarious person. That's a many syllable word there.
Yeah.
And I'm a lot more quiet and reserved.
Yeah,
but,
right. And yet
that's what makes the world go round, right?
And yet you've improved dramatically, and I'm still about as annoying as I ever was.
So I'm thinking that the conversation we had just a couple minutes ago, where you were talking about your portable device interview at the Chicago RPM, and that you were listening to it near Gary, Indiana, did that evolve into Lunchtime Show number 3, released on November 27th, 2017?
Sure.
That is my way of telling you that I've continued to work on the database,
which I'm very appreciative of, by the way.
I am up to early 2019, and I have 316 rows of data, meaning 316 different shows.
There are going to be many, 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 many people that are very grateful that you've put in this effort. Let me tell you.
Yeah, well, once it's done, and the point of actually being useful, but
I know
it's been an interesting project.
Well, and I'm very, very grateful that you're doing it too. And in fact, I'm so grateful. If I ever was so inclined, which I don't really think I am, but if I ever was so inclined, I might take you for a tour of Rapido trains.
You're fast track to model railroading fun.
Rapido trains, your fast track to model railroading fun.
All right, buddy. That's it. You and I have once again filled up a half an hour's worth of podcasting by doing the introduction and the wrap up. Our email address is modelerslife@gmail.com. That's modelerslife@gmail.com. Yeah, that's it. And that's 1L like railroad, not 2 L's like Gallitzin. Does Gallitzin have 2 L's in it?
I think I don't think so.
So close.
Here, how about this one? That's 1 L like Abelese, not 2 L's like Alex Lang.
Nice. Sweet. Nice. And if you didn't catch our email address, all you have to go to our website, and it's amodelerslife.com. That's another long story that Rich, you and I should sit down and analyze one day. Why the mailing address and the .com address is different. It's amodelerslife.com. And you go there, you scroll down just a little bit, and you'll see a picture of the moderately agitated mailboy in a particularly agitated state. And if you just click on that, there your email address will come up, and all you got to do is fill in your subject and your text, and you're ready to go. Let's see what else we got to tell them. Oh, yeah, Patreon. This is on the free channel. But for those of you who just can't get enough of the AML channel, for just a few cents a day, you can have twice as much podcasting a week, because on that channel, it's kind of like Lionel's Little Playhouse. It's a potpourri of all sorts of different things, and where we kind of let our hair down and have a lot of fun. and there's lots of folks that do belong to that. That's the True AML Nation right there on Tuesdays is the True AML Nation. If you want to, Rich, have you ever wanted a T-shirt with a hot dog on it?
A T-shirt with a hot dog on it? I'm kind of chilly to that idea right now.
Wouldn't it annoy Dave all to heck if you ended up getting so good at this that you ended up replacing him?
Oh,
I wonder if there'd be like tension at work and things like that.
No, because Dave is a natural talent and I have to work at it.
You're a developing talent. You know what? You're a solid third line center on any NHL team. That's who you are. You cannot win the Stanley Cup without guys like you. It's impossible. You're a 200-foot guy. You know what that means?
I do not.
200 feet is the length of an NHL arena.
Okay.
And a 200-foot guy, he plays from end to end. He is digging the whole time, trying to get that puck and help his team win. And,
okay, well, that's fair. I mean, I feel like I'm a team player at work especially.
Yep.
And in other things that I do. So appreciate the compliment.
And yeah, so if you go to a Midwest Model Railroad and their URL is midwestmodelrr.com and go across the menu bar to other and click on AML shop, boom. And there you will find t-shirts, hoodies, caps, mugs, whatever you could possibly need in AML merchandise. And in there you will find a t-shirt with a hot dog on it. And with that, I'm going to stop because we have used up way too much time. So are you ready?
I am ready.
So remember, a Modeler's Life podcast is considered marginally adequate by 6 out of 10. I feel as though you weren't ready. I feel as though you've hit the mute button. I feel as though you've just disappeared. 6 out of 10 co-hosts whose internet cut out.
No, it was me hitting the mute button again. My apologies. 6 out of 10 bad spellers because I gave you bad spelling advice about Gallitzin.
Oh, there you go. All right.
It does have 2 L's.
A Modeler's Life is sponsored by Because I Love Sushi. You could love any old sushi, but would it love you back?
It's another Lincoln Homer.